Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Shoot from the Hoop, where we talk all things FITASC and sporting clays. My name's Jeff Jensen. I'm the host of the podcast, and I have a phenomenal guest today, Mr. Terry Vanderplas from Arizona. Terry, long time no see. We were together on Sunday at Lost Dutchman.
Yeah. The wind has even died since then. So.
You know what? I went to work on Monday morning and there was no wind. And I said, go figure, Saturday was windy, Sunday it was windy. Yeah. So Terry, one of my goals in the podcast is just to interview great people, interesting people, people that aren't necessarily always on the high overall list at the regionals or the nationals, but people that are making a difference in the background. And you truly have been a staple in sporting clays, particularly in the Arizona area. So I was hoping we could just kind of vet some of that out. I'd love to hear some of your stories.
Sure, it was all a big accident. So.
Well, that's where we start. So you've had your shooting accolades also. I mean, you've been all state, all region. You've had an incredible competition background that really led to kind of behind the scenes work. How'd you get started in the shooting?
At the ripe age of 52, I believe I was. A friend of a friend invited him to go shoot sporting clays at Rio Salado. And our mutual friend knew that I hunted quite a bit and thought I would enjoy it. And so got invited along and shot a massive 66 with my goose gun. And the next morning I skipped church, which I don't do all that often, skipped church just to go back because I knew that I could do better than that, and shot a 76 the next day. And the addiction was born. So.
I did the exact same thing. I went out with my Benelli Super Black Eagle, my 3.5-inch goose gun, and that was my introduction. So it's very common. I mean, and at the age of 52 also. So what happened from there? You got hooked on the sport, and then you started shooting a lot and competing. How'd that play out over time?
Several paths there. With my personality, I like to dig into things and kind of get behind the scenes of things. And one of the earliest things that I accidentally did was get on an internet forum, Shotgun World, and met a few friends there, a couple guys. As a matter of fact, I'm leaving in 3 days to go goose hunting with a couple of guys, those guys from Missouri. But anyway, got on the forum, and at that time, that was a good forum, and found some guys who gave me some great advice very early on, like 2 competitions in, and one of those friends, Tom Ruck, told me one of the first things you need to do is go find an older masterclass experienced shooter and just ask if you could squad with him while you're just learning. Not for the purpose of learning how to shoot necessarily, but just to learn how to be a good squad mate. So by coincidence, I was squadded with Dave Schnack not too long after that, and Dave certainly fits that qualification. He's an ex-Air Force retired pilot, and he's a stickler for the rules, and there's a proper way to do things. And so I shot quite a bit that first summer with Dave, but still grateful to him for all the lessons I learned about how to be a good squad mate. So, and that's kind of how I got started. And then one of the second influences was a biology professor at Kansas State University, Dr. Spencer Toom, who was a great FITASC shooter. And we shared a connection because that's my alma mater, Kansas State. And he told me one night, he says, you live less than 60 miles from the reigning world champion of this game, right? And I said, no. And he said, yeah. He's a young man by the name of Gavin Miles. I think you'll like him. So that very first summer, I started taking lessons from Gavin, and that's where it all took off from, that part of it. So.
Gosh, that's great. I have a similar story, Terry. In 2008, when I started shooting, I jumped on Shotgun World too. And you know who was very helpful to me? Sarah Russell. He's been on there for many years, to the point that Sarah invited me to shoot with him at the Nationals that year. Yeah. And I did. And to your point, it's one thing to know how to shoot. It's another thing to understand the game and be a squad mate. But Sarah was great. He told me a lesson early on. He said, Jeff, if you hit everything within 30 yards and then you just get your share of the rest, you'll do just fine.
Yep. And his second saying is put a mod joke in and practice. So
that's his other saying. That's correct. Oh, he's a great guy. I still connect with him once in a while on social media. So that's interesting. So once you got shooting, then you got some lessons from Gavin, you got your fundamentals down. When did you find that you started to have kind of a penchant for target setting or getting deeper into the game in the background?
Well, and that kind of came from actually from a completely different direction. A young man that worked for me years ago went on to become a highway patrol trooper, and I actually wrote his letter of recommendation to go to trooper school. So if you've ever got a speeding ticket from him, I'm sorry, but anyway, he called me. We had stayed in touch over the years, and his son Daniel was wanting to shoot in the SCTP program there up in Globe, where I was living at the time, where we lived for 30 years. And but he needed coaches, and I don't think he even knew that I was really shooting sporting clays at that point. I mean, he was a trap shooter, still is. And so I said, sure. He said, well, I need 6 registered certified coaches to start a program. And he said, so anyway, my wife and I actually both took the certification program, and obviously she's not a shooter at all and has no desire to be, but she's a great safety officer. She loves kids and keeps an eye on them. And when I would get a little too focused on one kid or a group of kids, she would always be kind of keeping an eye on things. And so that got me started with those kids. And one of the first things is all we had was a single trap field, and that's all that club up there had at the time. And so but by coincidence, another fellow that I went to church with was the environmental director up at Freeport, which was Cypress at the time, the mine. And he said, I like what you're doing with those kids. He said, I'd like to find a way to help them. And so we organized a little deal where we took all the kids and did a highway cleanup one weekend. And for that, the mine then in turn bought 5 traps for those kids. And I had borrowed some from Ben Avery and stuff. And so we set up a 5-stand field up there and started coaching, and great group of kids we were working with up there. So I do miss that. That's one of the few things I miss from moving down here to be closer to my grandkids now.
So where are you living now then, Terry?
We live in Santan Valley. So
fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. Got a couple neighbors here. Daniel Connect spends the winter up the road about a mile north, and Russ Wald is a couple miles to the west of me over here, or east of me over here. So
there you go. So how did you find yourself setting targets for big events? Because you've helped with some of the Grand Slam FITASC events down at Coyote Springs, and that's an interesting path also.
I had a lot of help in the beginning with those kids up in Globe. We decided, well, we'll throw some 5-stand and some events and maybe make some money for them. We started them as fundraisers, and I had some help from Dan Twitchell and Jonathan McGraw, Mike Rogers, those guys at Ben Avery at the time, and they came up and brought traps with them, and I built the course, but they brought the traps, and that kind of got me started in that. And then, of course, Tim Miles is just the foundation of everything. I was taking lessons from Gavin. I was probably spending too many weekends in Tucson practicing and training down there, and so quickly got, I don't know what came first, the offer to help or the offer for me to come help and learn. But I quickly started working with Tim quite a bit, and that's still the things I learned from him are the foundation of what I do. And that every target has to be, number 1, it has to be safe. Number 2, it has to be fair. And number 3, it has to be a challenge for the shooter. This is a tournament. These are tournament settings that we're setting targets for, where people want to see where their abilities have taken them. So those are the 3 basic rules I still use to this day. So
I love it. I see the background on your screen. It's Lost Dutchman. It's Parkour 2 from last weekend.
It is.
But it doesn't look windy in that picture, Terry.
No, it's pretty calm. I was using a fast shutter speed, I think. So.
Oh my gosh. So, that brings up some interesting questions, because the targets were phenomenal, but you set the targets with Ryan, right? Ryan Holmes?
Right, correct.
And you, on Saturday morning, I can't even imagine, you get there and in 30-mile-an-hour winds, and then you're planning for the Sunday 20-mile-an-hour winds. It was tough. I mean, I shot in the event. It was a wonderful event, but I was thinking during it, man, it'd be hard to set these targets. What are some of the challenges you were finding?
Yeah, that Saturday morning was a pretty straight east wind of 15 to 20, 15 to 18 mile an hour with higher gusts and stuff. And so we adjusted everything that we had set on Friday. And then by Saturday afternoon, when we were going back through checking things again, the wind had switched more to the northeast. And as you know, from having been there with those hills and the valleys and crevasses in between them, that really changed the target behavior. That Parkour 3 was nowhere near what it looked like Saturday on noon by Sunday morning because all the changes we had to make there. So, but
The wind was a little
the good news
squirrely.
is it was a 1 day tournament, so it was what it was. It wasn't like we had to hang that out for a while. So.
No, that's a good point. If it's a multi-day tournament and then and we do that all the time. We see it. The wind shifts and targets that are moderately hard the next day are easy the next and vice versa.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because Lost Dutchman's great. I mean, you and I've shot a ton down in Tucson. In fact, Terry, I was thinking the other day when I was getting ready for this podcast, remember during COVID, there weren't a lot of people out shooting. And then one day I was Celia, my wife and I were out and you and your wife were out and we just kind of converged and talked a little bit. And it was a tough time for everybody, including the shooting community.
It was, but what you mentioned is also one of the greatest parts of the sport. So some of my closest friends now have come from the game. So,
oh my gosh, that's so true. I was talking to Ryan and sharing with him that I think I see my buddies that I shoot with all over the country more often than I see my neighbors.
That's very true. So, actually, Ryan and I were talking the other night about a similar memory. To go back to target setting for a minute, one of the things that working with Tim Miles and then Steve Schultz led to was for many years when the 74 Ranch was quite the facility, probably one of the premier training facilities in the United States. They would have Steve Schultz with Target Line come in and reset the targets once a year for practice and training. I guess if somebody doesn't know what the 74 Ranch is it was a gigantic sporting clay course of 16 stations, and each station had at least 8 traps on it, and they all kind of had a theme, and it was just a fantastic training facility. The rabbit station, for example, had 8 rabbit machines on it from every different angle and distance and things, and you could really go there and train. So anyway, once a year in August, we would all get together, and that's where I had the access to. I mean, I was setting targets alongside of Tim Miles, of course, but Brett Seibert and David Nieder of Fossil Point, Jeff Foster, rest his soul, from Cap City over in Austin or Dripping Springs area, and some of the most highly regarded target setters in the business, and I got to work alongside of them every year for 4 or 5 years in there, setting all those traps. And what that reminded me of that when we were talking about the wind is that was, here in South Texas, we were dealing with wind over there and learned quite a few tricks on how to maneuver around that when it's possible. So, but those are good days.
Oh, but you said it was. Is that no longer available?
The last I understood that is correct, that they had pulled all the machines out of the 74 Ranch. So,
oh my gosh, I did not know that. All right,
they're still doing their high fence hunting and exotic hunting and stuff like that. But from what I understand, the sporting clays facility's gone. So it's a shame. It's a great facility.
Oh, I did not have the opportunity to go. I feel bad about that.
Oh.
Terry, so you started shooting about 12 years ago or so. What are some of the changes you've seen over the years in the sporting clays environment and FITASC?
Physically for the game, of course, the targets have gotten, more creative, and you got a lot of guys out there really, pushing the limits of those things. And I love to see that. That's the kind of stuff that I like to see. But I don't know. I mean, I still feel like I'm on my first cycle through this game. I remember when I started, the things I thought were probably silly or wrong, or I'd like to change this. Older guys said, no, it's there for a reason. And now I'm kind of at that point where the classification system and stuff like that doesn't matter so much to me, things. But the game has gotten less social. I at least locally here, it used to be much more of a social occasion. You gather around the score sheets and on the scoreboard and see if you made the first page. If you were at a big shoot, that was the goal in those days. So, but
it's funny you mention that.
I don't mean to be negative about it because the sport continues to improve and gain and everything else. I just maybe mourn the loss of some of the hanging out we used to do. So.
Yes, being by the scoreboard is unique because I remember when I first started shooting, we weren't getting scores via the internet or emails. You had to stick around. It's kind of like running races. It was the same way. If you didn't stick around, you'd have to wait forever to see the results.
first shoot off I ever got into was at the Wyoming State shoot in outside of Rock Springs, and I was halfway back to the airport in Salt Lake City when somebody called and said, "Hey, you're in a shoot off." And I said, "Well, what's it for?" And they told me the trophy and the dollar amount involved, and I said, "I'll be right back." So,
oh my gosh, that's great. So you turned around and went back.
Still managed to make my plane. So.
Oh my gosh, that is fabulous. Hey Terry, comment a little bit about the elevation of the sport with the training and the quality coaching we have. I mean, I've worked with Gebben also. I've worked with several different coaches. I work with Brad a lot. Big difference. It certainly enhances the learning curve.
It does. It does. I think, but a lot of people, though, view lessons as too expensive when it's the cheapest investment you can make in the game. You can send 1,000 rounds down range, and if you're doing it wrong, you're only reinforcing a bad habit and a good instructor. So I think the secret to a lot, and then people, so they only take a lesson or two and they think they've learned enough and now they're going to go work on their own. And I don't think that's a great program. I think you need to find a coach that you like and can communicate well with, and schedule regular lessons once a month, whatever your budget will allow. Maybe once a quarter is enough for a lot of people, but I think you really have to kind of get with the system and stay with it. So.
And there's so many analogies to golf, because
yes,
I've found over the years, like in golfing, they talk about when your driver's on, your short game might not be, or your putting might not be, but shooting's not a lot different. I mean, it comes and goes, and crossers and incomers and towers and Shondells. I mean, everything's different. It seems like what worked last year isn't working right now, so you need a little tune-up once in a while. So
definitely agree with getting good coaching if you want to improve at the game. So. The other thing that I always encourage people to do, because this was advice given to me early, Tom Ruck is the one who told me this, and he said, if you're going to be a big fish in a small bowl and you're happy with that, that's okay. Stay home and shoot your tournaments. But if you're ever going to be really good at this game, you've got to travel. And so my wife and I at that point were empty nesters. Our kids were grown and gone, and there was about a 10-year period when I had the time to travel. And I think the last time I looked, I shot competitions at 43 different clubs in 17 different states. And so combining the two topics back to target setting, that also, I'm a horrible note taker. I take notes on everything. And, when I'd see a presentation that I really thought was fun and enjoyable, I made a note. And by the same token, sometimes I would make a note, never throw that. So
True. That's interesting, because I've been in the same boat, and it took me a while to get used to different terrains and different backgrounds and making sure my glasses were right. And you just don't show up and shoot. I mean, it makes it very hard.
Yeah. Yep. That's difficult. So we see it on the other end out here, the guys that are used to shooting back in the Southeast and in all the greenery and everything else. And then they come out here and everything is open sky. And I get it. It's hard to see distance. Everything looks bigger out here when it's really not. So,
right. Yeah, because instead of your hold point marking it on trees and branches, you're marking your hold points on distant mountains and cactus.
Yes. Yeah.
I love how that works. So Terry, you also love to hunt. In fact, you're off on a duck hunt this week.
I am. I'm leaving Monday, headed for the Boot Hill of Missouri to hunt some ducks and geese. So.
Oh my gosh!
With some of those original guys I met 15 years ago, and I've hunted with them ever since and shot with them many times. So, Tom Ruck, Jay Harrington, and Gary Fitzgerald, who runs FLC Shooting Club in Whitehall, Illinois. So,
right.
I assume the fifth is G-Dub, his son. So,
oh, that's great. Yeah, I've followed Gary over the years. If I had him on the podcast, though, I'd have to beep out all the half of the words, right?
Well. Gary's one of the coolest guys on the planet, but yeah, his filter is unplugged. So,
well, that's what we have editing for. That's no problem.
That's what we love him for.
Absolutely. So, Terry, how about your life outside of shooting and giving back to sporting clays? Your career, what did you do for a living?
Well, again, it was all a big accident. I'm still working a summer job. Looking for work between semesters, basically at Kansas State, and the Rock Island Railroad had been in bankruptcy for 15 years. And a group of elevator owners and businesses in that part of the world invested and bought the railroad. And so when I came home from school looking for summer work, a brand new railroad, and they were looking for help and summer help putting in ties the old-fashioned way by hand. And so I hired out, and one thing led to another, and started making pretty good money, and here I am. But anyway, that was in the early 80s. In 1988, the railroad moved me to Arizona. They purchased the railroad that runs from Globe through Safford and down to Bowie. And I was roadmaster on that railroad for 8 years, and then went to work for Mountain States Contracting, a railroad contractor here in Arizona, and basically the southwestern United States. And in 2000, had an opportunity to become one of the owners, and took that opportunity. And now I'm nearing the end, hoping to retire here in a few months. And I bought some property in Alaska from another sporting clay shooter, Mike Graves, and planning on spending my summers up there. And we'll see. I may still continue to do some work for Mountain States remotely, computer-wise and stuff. But hopefully my days of bouncing around chasing crews and customers are over.
So, my affiliation with trains is when I go on road trips and I see them paralleling the interstate, and you often wonder, like, how does that work? What goes right, what goes wrong? From a layperson perspective, give us a perspective of something that we should know that we don't know, that doesn't know anything about trains.
Oh, I guess one of the most obviously inobvious that doesn't rival common sense is the railroads are a solid piece of steel, in many cases miles and miles long. And if you take a quarter-mile long piece of rail and you place it in the sun at 50 degrees or whatever temperature, and you allow it to warm in the sun 5 degrees, and measure that piece of rail, it will be about a quarter of an inch longer. So for every 5 degrees, if it's laying on the ground unrestrained, for every 5 degrees, the rail expands to that. Well, the rail can't expand when it's placed in the structure, so it builds up compression. The compression is roughly equal to, I always like to use this analogy, USS Missouri was the first ship to fire accurately 14-inch guns. And if you can imagine the pounds per square inch of pressure it takes to heave a shell 14 inches around and heave it accurately 8 miles away, that's roughly the same amount of compression that will build up in a railroad track on a hot day when the temperature's over 100 degrees, which is what the ballast is there for. And so people tend to just see that as rock. But I like to use that analogy because when my guys are out there working on the track and it's a hot day and everybody's a little bit tired, there's literally a bomb underneath your feet. So everything we do in the railroad industry is built around managing that expansion and contraction, which will explain a lot of odd and unusual things you'll see around the railroad. So that's like asking a librarian about penguins. You probably learned more than you wanted to know. But anyway.
No, I like that. In fact, then so what is the number one common thing that you said? It's expansion. That's what you're trying to address.
Yeah,
huh?
we manage expansion and contraction of the rail in dozens of different ways that we do that. But one of them is we pay attention to what temperature we lay the rail at, and when we anchor it into place. And if we have to, we heat it to at least a minimum temperature of that heat range.
So are they still building railroad tracks, or are we repairing old ones? Is that a fair question?
Both. There are no new main lines or transcontinental kind of railroads and stuff, but when Ronald Reagan deregulated the railroad industry with the Staggers Act in the 80s, that kind of created the short line industry where the major railroads could spin off all of these branch lines to different places and created short line railroads. And so that created a whole industry on its own. But our work primarily is design build of new facilities on the major railroads, in that we don't work directly for the Union Pacific or the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, but we do work for all of their customers and build their sidings and spurs and things like that. Built a nice new industrial park up in Surprise here not too long ago for Nestle and White Claw and Red Bull, and all of those beverages require sugar. So most of what we built was for the importation of sugar. So
I kind of got an education a little bit when I read Atlas Shrugged and all the railroad
Yep.
stories in there. Are those
Great book.
true? I mean, is that like real kind of stories?
Actually, there was as everything, it's dramatized a little bit, but there was a lot of truth in a lot of respects in those books. I think they should be required reading for every high school student. So,
Oh, me too. I listened to it on my audio, and it was like 60 hours or something. It
Yep.
took me forever to get through it.
Yep.
All right. So how about some rapid fire questions? Things
Sure.
that are just fun. So what kind of gun are you shooting?
That's a good question. I have a Beretta DT11 with a Jim Greenwood stock on it. Beautiful piece of lumber, and the gun is marvelous. But was shooting last weekend, and I think I've got a torn labrum. I'm going to have to go see a doctor here before too long. So I may be back to shooting my old Beretta 390 or 391 semi-auto here for a while. So we'll see. But,
All right. Sounds good. Well, when you're shooting, what kind of shells you shooting? What speed?
B&P 1 ounce 1165s. Pretty steady on that. I love the Bornagi gold. That for whatever reason those shells just seem to turn targets inside out of my gun. But they're 1200 and they're a little bit sharp, and so I've avoided shooting those here for a little bit. So.
And, I love those 1160s when I use my over under, but I too have been shooting my I shoot an A400. I don't have a 390, but I've had multiple A400s, and those I just speed it up a little bit because recoil's not an issue.
Yep, I've been shopping a little bit or keeping my eyes open, so in case that direction I need to move more. So
that's you see more and more of those guns out there, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, some good buys.
Yeah, I mean, more guns on the Sporting Clays course that are semi-autos. As we get older, and so it makes sense.
I had to borrow or borrow Tom Harris's new A400 there to finish the round. So,
when I was younger, I didn't believe it when they said recoil is not your friend. I didn't believe it, but now I know it's not.
It's not. I to be clear, the shoulder is not anything shooting related or recoil related, but recoil certainly irritates it. So,
very good. All right. So non-shooting related vacation. Where are you going?
Oh, back to Alaska. Well, that's a tough call. I had a great year fishing this year. I started the year on the Arkansas River in Colorado while I had a crew working up there, but spent a week or 10 days in Alaska this year fishing with Mike Graves out of Seward, and we did well on the salmon. We floated a couple rivers and fly fished, and that was awesome. And then again, another shooting buddy, Keith Clements out of Idaho. If that gentleman ever invites you to go smallmouth bass fishing, go. Drop everything and go. So that was a great few days fishing with him. So yeah, probably one of those places, Alaska, Idaho, Montana.
Funny story about
fly rod. So
hunting, fishing, Sporting Clays sounds like the trifecta.
Yeah, and I would probably be smart to limit it there. But
there you go. So funny story, during COVID, I used to go down to Ben Avery and do laps on the dirt road, right? And Keith would do the same thing. So Keith and I would connect, and we'd go for these long walks and shoot the breeze about everything. So he's a great guy. Just a great guy. All right. Let's see. What other fun question could I ask you? Beverage of choice.
Arnold Palmer.
All right. Very good. And if you and your wife are going out for dinner, what is the food of choice?
Easy call. We're gonna go over to Santan Flats. Great music, cold beer once in a while if I want to have one, and great food, live music, everything about the place. Great place.
Well, that's fantastic. All right, Terry, I thank you for carving out a half hour of your time and joining me on Shoot from the Hoop. Just a great conversation, and I've gotten so used to seeing you out on the courses, but you don't really get people's backstories. You don't know that much about everybody, So thank you.
Probably the shoots I've enjoyed the most over the years are those working behind the scenes with Cherie Vigil, and she's always my captain, and I just enjoy working the shoots and helping them be successful. I love Sporting Clays. I love Sporting Clays in Arizona, and intend to keep on doing all I can do to keep the sport going. So love helping Dan and Hugo out at Lost Dutchman too, for sure. So,
oh my gosh, what an incredible facility. And they put a lot of work into that place. And it's just great and what a great addition to the Arizona sporting place.
Beautiful place.
It really is. Well, Terry, thanks again, and appreciate you joining me. And I look forward to seeing you out on the course.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Have a great hunting trip. Shoot a bunch of geese and ducks. All right.
I'm sure we will.
All right. Well,
it was turned into my stomach is sore from laughing at those guys, but
in the cheeks.
Maybe we'll get a few ducks too. So.
Well, there you go. Well, to all of our listeners out there, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating, or better yet, leave a comment. And if you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. I'm going to do my best to bring great stories in FITASC and sporting clays to the podcast. Thanks again for joining us. See you next week. Cheers.